Thanks, Tom.
Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present two people you need to know. One is a dear friend who is hosting his 8th episode on this platform. The other is a media mogul who is involved in one of the all-time coolest brands in the whole music industry. I promise you will leave smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those directly as possible during the interview. Also, to the audience, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not do this for free. Special thank you to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, and Better Than Booze. And one more that I want to talk about is called MedJet. A note to anybody that travels for a living, MedJet is must-have coverage for people like yourselves. This is a service that will get you home if you are ever in trouble on the road. Trust me, MedJet is made for you if you travel, especially internationally. So let's get down to business. Today, I am excited to present Jimmy Hutcheson. Jimmy is the CEO of Spin, the iconic music media company that celebrates its 40th anniversary in 2025. He's also CEO of Next Management Partners, a media and tech investment firm in LA that acquired Spin from Billboard in 2020. Among his accolades, Jimmy's digital media networks were the first to syndicate premium television content for the Food Network and Travel Channel across the web. He's also the business partner of Time Inc.'s president, Rich Batista, in Snackle.com, a digital media venture that has been featured in major media outlets, including Today Show, The Hollywood Reporter, Yahoo, Huffington Post, AOL, and many more. He's an entrepreneur, advisor, and co-founder in several tech and media ventures in the marketing, technology, advertising, and e-commerce and digital media industries. Jimmy, it is such an honor to have you with us today. Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom.
And joining Jimmy is my good friend, David Hazan. For over 25 years, David has been a leading force in the intersection of music, entertainment, events, and technology. As a strategic marketing consultant, David has helped more than 40 clients grow their brands and businesses, including ShowPass Ticketing, The Cauldron, Tapalti, Sound Exchange, Audio Shake, Jukebox, Dot Music, Bandoozle, Found.ee, CID Entertainment, AEG, TVT, Shout Factory, and the Ottawa Blues Fest, among dozens of others. In recent years, David has curated and moderated more than 50 physical and virtual panels and keynote interviews at leading industry events, including Walifornia, So Alive, NEVA, Music Tectonics, Music Biz, South by Southwest, Mondo, Cool Out, NOLA Music Con, and Canadian Music Week, where he also produced the CMW and O Cannabis hackathons. David's deep experience in music marketing includes senior executive positions held at Medem, The Orchard, Universal Music Group, Warner Music, VH1, Putumayo, and Wind Up Records. As I mentioned, this is his 8th time in the host seat, and it is such a privilege to have him back. It is my pleasure to welcome both of these rock stars to our platform today. Take it away, boys.
Thanks, Tom. Hey, Jimmy.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Hi, David.
Hey. Instead of starting at the beginning, I'm going to go right to your first big music jolt, Jimmy. What were you doing when you got that first music charge and knew that music was going to be the most important thing in your life besides family?
Well, yeah, I think at a young age, I was a DJ. I had this I think I was playing in band in junior high, and then I played probably one of the more lame instruments in band, the trombone. It's not like I was a drummer or a guitarist. I played the trombone. And we were in a recital kind of thing, and I loved it was a big auditorium, and there were these bright, cool lights, and the stage and the curtains, and everything. Just the whole production was like, whoa, this is cool. And I liked that. And then, like I said, I was also a DJ from a young age, like 12 was when I started DJing. So I was just inspired. Oh, I like that, the slide guitar of brass instruments. Thanks, Sean. That's a good one. I do think that and that's from the chat window, by the way. I just caught that in the corner of my eye. I think that what I loved about moving over to DJing is that I liked just making people happy. I loved the sound. I love the picking out the right equipment. I'm not an audiophile by any stretch of the imagination, but I loved messing with the equipment. I loved having like my own fog machine and my own, subwoofers and all this. And I would DJ weddings and school dances and everything. And yeah, just always loved, I guess, um, making people smile, making people happy. And then I just loved music itself. And I was never really just one genre. I've always loved all genres of music. And I think that's what got me started, was like that trombone, and then those DJing gigs long time ago. So
Cool. So fast forward a bit. How did you originally discover spin and what did it mean to you at that time?
well, I I discovered spin in the 90s, when I think a lot of us did, and just always saw spin as on the cutting edge of what was next. I mean, a lot of spin put Nirvana on their very first magazine cover, and then in the last few years, we were the first to write about Olivia Rodrigo. So when I was young, I always saw spin as being first and to what was new.
How did spin inform your musical sensibilities and influence you in terms of your likes?
I think it influenced me. Um, I mean, at the time, I guess rock and grunge and all that was pretty big. So yeah, I think it influenced my knowledge of some of the artists. Like I was able to learn more about REM or Pearl Jam or whoever by what the spin journalists were saying about them. And that's unique because now what you see is that if you're going to learn about someone like Pearl Jam, you're probably going to start at their Instagram, and you're going to see what they say about themselves. But I think the role that spin had then and still has today is to have a third party criticism. No, you don't see a lot of people and these big acts, even small acts, being very self-deprecating. They're all Everything's kind of messaged and everything's very controlled. And I think that's what I always admired about spin, is it could, back then when I started reading spin, is that you could examine and learn and go deep on an artist. Um and I've had people come up to me and say, like, the like REM, great example. A friend said REM wrote the story of my childhood, and then spin helped tell the story of REM. So we've played a very important role in the lives of many readers over the years, where we've helped um, tell the narrative of some of these bands, hopefully accurately. Sometimes we don't get it right. Sometimes we do get it right. But often now you see, and I know this will probably be for the later in the discussion, you see everyone on, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, wherever, they are telling their own story before anyone else is really having a chance to tell that story. That's a whole different topic, though. But
Well,
that's what inspired me about spin in the early days, was, at my early days of reading it at least, was that seeing something new, seeing a narrative that maybe I wasn't aware of.
And the ability back then where people discovered music from the radio, like most people, but serious music fans trying to stay ahead of what radio was playing would often turn to print. And back then you would get a certain filter, a certain sensibility for recommendations. So that role is arguably more important now when people are discovering sanitized, polished versions of their stories, self-curated by the artists themselves. So I wonder, besides criticism, because no one really wants to read criticism, how can you describe, Spin's perspective and Spin's role in terms of offering a more balanced, less artist obsessed version of their stories and their music?
Yeah. Well, part of what I would say is that it doesn't always have to be balanced. That is kind of a misnomer in really media in general, is that um, the idea is that a journalist may not like a band and they may not give both sides of the equation. And I think it actually just, now that you asked, it came up in the chat. Someone asked, what do you make of the Jane's Addiction incident feud? And I know we'll get the questions later, but I'll just use this as an example. You can go on spin.com and read a scathing review of the Jane's Addiction career, like of all, like it's by Matt Thompson. Look it up on spin.com. I mean, he ripped them a new one. That's Matt Thompson. He's one of our features editors, right? He's a great journalist, great guy. That woke up some of the band members, and Eric Avery, who plays bass in Jane's Addiction, called up Spin and said, I want to meet this Matt Thompson guy right now. And so Eric went and sat down with Matt and had a coffee with him, and basically I guess they went at it. I wasn't there. I don't know if they came to blows like Perry did against Dave Navarro the other night. But here's a music critic sitting with the bass player of Jane's Addiction. And what came out of that, if you've picked up the newest copy of Spin in print, which I have right here, we have a story by Eric Avery called Jane's Addiction, The Needle and the Damage Done, by bassist Eric Avery. So Eric ended up writing a story based on that conversation. So I guess what I'm saying about that word balanced is that, you have human beings who are not always balanced. And I mean, we're in the entertainment world, we're in the music world. Let's have some fun, right? Let's have fun. This isn't CNN, this isn't Fox News. We're about the fun, right? And that's what Matt set out to do. Was he grew up listening to Jane's Addiction, and his argument in the article was they're not the same band anymore, right? So, not everyone can have the longevity of the Rolling Stones and sound as incredible as they do. I went to a Rolling Stones concert a few months ago on this latest tour they were on, and man, I mean, they just blow you away. Jane's Addiction, not so much. And I think the role that the criticism has, I think that's what you were asking, is that it's one lens to look at an artist through, and you should look at multiple lenses. I always tell people, look at other sources, check it out for yourself. What people do now is they go on Spotify and you can just hear the music yourself, right? And then if you want a more informed take, and by informed, I just mean maybe someone who like studies music, someone who studies that genre. We've got guys at Spin who are total encyclopedias on different artists. Like one writer is a complete guru on Bruce Springsteen. He's an encyclopedia. He could tell you more than Google could tell you about Bruce Springsteen. And we've got another that's everything hip hop. Spin was known for putting hip hop stars on the cover when no one else would. We had Public Enemy on the covers in the 80s, Run DMC. So yeah, I think generally speaking, the journalists are one of many places you can stop to read more, understand more, but it doesn't mean that they're always right. And case in point, I loved how everything came full circle with Jane's Addiction with Eric Avery wanting to come in and write after seeing this scathing article. And it's brutal. If you go read it on spin.com and go, oh my gosh,
That's not
he lit
sanitized.
into them. It got their attention. But the funny thing is they end up sharing that scathing article on their Instagram and Facebook and everything else. So, you know,
It
any
was
press, good press, I guess, for them.
it was real. It was real.
But yeah, we can get into the incident later. But yeah, it looked terrible what happened between Perry and Dave on stage, and everyone behind the scenes is like, "Yep, it's done. It's really done." So
For now, these things have a way of coming back with all the attention and ink that they're getting now. Wouldn't be surprised post rehab for a big reunion tour that would do better than this. Stranger things have happened, but I
yeah,
um I guess the next question I want to ask is like, do you think that writing about music is like dancing about architecture, to use that famous quote that no one knows who exactly said first? But is there a disconnect between something that you can't really describe what makes it great besides information and criticism and perspective?
yeah, I think so. There is there's an art and a science to music depending on who you are looking at. Like some of you may have heard about that story where and this is the science side. I think Grimes did a DJ set at Coachella, and there's some mathematical equation she used to like build her set, and then that equation in her laptop was thrown off. Like, I don't know, I'm not criticizing, but like that, and then like the art, there's I go back to I like to know the story behind the person, what inspired them, and then sometimes it's just, hey, this sounds good. Like, we can't at Spin, we can't take ourselves too seriously. We have to make sure we're having fun, and it has to be about the fun. And Spin's been good at this over the years. It's always been about the irreverence. Let's have some fun. Spin was some of you may have seen the South Park episode where Spin was um, uh, the South Park creators had Spin in an episode, and basically there's a journalist from Spin that's being poked fun at for his criticism of Lord. And that, I mean, to me, that's, we just try not to take ourselves so serious, where it's not fun. The reader has to feel the energy, the fun, the lightheartedness. Even when it's like a serious criticism, I still think it has to be met with um, enjoyment and fun, and putting a smile on people's faces. And not every writer that's ever written for Spin has that tone, but I think Bob Guccione Jr., the founder of Spin, who's, editor in chief right now, again, he really tries to instill that in everybody.
How did you get Bob Guccione Jr. to come back after all these years?
Yeah, I get asked that almost every day. Basically, we just got along really well. Bob is a savant, and there's people that really are big fans of Bob. And I think the reason I wanted him to come back is I knew it would be good for the readers. You have to put the audience first, the people reading what you're doing. And yeah, I think generally speaking, um, because we got along really well, we got to know each other. There was this sort of crawl, walk, run with Bob, where he started off as more of an advisor, and then he eventually became editor in chief again for the first time since 1997. A lot of people don't realize how long Bob had been gone from Spin, but he sold Spin for almost $50 million in 1997 to Quincy Jones and Miller Publishing. And then Spin traded hands a number of times. And Bob, I think, had done an article here or there every 10 years, but basically, yeah, it's, he just didn't, it's not that he didn't get along with the other owners. I just think when you can bring a founder back into a company that's a good thing if it's successful like Spin was. So Bob's been back at Spin for about 4.5 years.
Cool. Going back a little bit, early in your career, you'd worked for Doc McGee, the manager of Motley Crue and Kiss. What was that like, and what led to that?
Working for Doc. Well, I think what led to that, I had a friend that in Los Angeles that worked in entertainment marketing, and he knew Doc, and Doc was hiring interns. And yeah, I was there in like the early 2000s, and it was a one of a kind place to work, let's just say. I mean, this was post, Bon Jovi and all those acts. This is obviously Kiss was his client. Um, he's actually super intuitive. We still stay in touch. He's a great guy. I mean, if you've seen him in the Bon Jovi doc, it's very telling and about who he is as a person. And obviously, he's had his past, as he would admit. There's been some interesting things that have happened in his past, but my experiences with them by the time I was there, um, it was kind of like the place where you wanted to work. You wanted to work for a big manager like Doc so you could learn the ropes. And he's just really generous and good to his people. And I think everybody who's been around him would say that. And he's, I wasn't there during the wild 1980s and 1990s, but maybe I guess you could say I was there when he was the more seasoned version of himself. And but no, he's a good guy, and I think he probably learned a lot throughout his whole career. And I do admire everything he did. Probably the funniest thing that happened while working for Doc McGee is that one day one of Doc's managers came in and said, "Hey Jimmy, we're going to put you up to be the assistant for Gene Simmons." I'm like, the assistant for Gene Simmons? Do I want to? Well, I guess I should want to do this. I don't know. Should I? Um, and you would go work with Gene. And so I'm like, what do you do? And like, what you do when you're the assistant for Gene Simmons. Like you you arrange things for Gene, basically, without getting into details. And like, okay, I don't know if that's for me. So I ended up talking with Gene about it, and I'm sure he doesn't remember this, but yeah, I basically the pay was going to be terrible, less than I was making with Doc, and it was going to be traveling all the time. And some of the duties on the job description were somewhat questionable, not just ethically, but morally.
Legally.
So I ended up not doing that, but it was kind of cool to go through like an interview process with Gene Simmons.
Okay. What was the most outrageous thing that you saw during all your time there that you can share here, keeping in mind that Tom runs a family-friendly web series here?
Yeah, okay, great. Family friendly. I mean, the one that comes to mind is I was in a fraternity at Pepperdine University in Malibu, and I would go in to Doc's office, and I was working there at the office, and we had another manager in there named Snake Sabo, who is the guitar player for Skid Row. Some of you probably know who Snake is and know Skid Row. And one Monday I came back in, and I just felt so big and so cool. We had like had this big fraternity party, and I'm telling Snake about it. And as I'm telling him about it, I'm like, yeah, we filled up this bathtub with ice and then put all this beer in it. And like, I'm just telling him all the details about how we set up the party. And he's just like looking at me frowning. He's like, dude, I was in Skid Row. Like, we did this every single night. And I'm like, oh, and I felt so small. But, I was trying to look like a rock star to the rock star, and it didn't work.
Doesn't work. It never does. What were you doing when you found out that Spin was available? Like, how did you come to acquire it? What were the conditions and circumstances surrounding that?
Yeah, well, it's not just me. There's other owners of Spin, and there's a group of us, and I'm one of them, and I'm the CEO. So basically, I had a friend who was running Billboard, and just had that relationship. And I knew what else Billboard owned, and I knew they weren't really managing Spin the best way that they could. The editors were good. Like Matt Medved, who was the editor in chief when we bought it, like he'd done some cool work with Billie Eilish with Spin, like early on in her career. Like Matt's really, good dude, and there's some other good ones that were there too. And by the way, like as a new owner of anything, it's like the easiest thing in the world to come on to a show like this and just trash the previous people. Oh, they were awful. Oh, it's so like I'm not going to do that. Like there's some good people there who did great things and some who didn't. But I knew that Spin wasn't being allowed to be at its full potential. So I ended up just staying in touch with my friend who was the Billboard president. And for over the course of a year, I was trying to basically talk her into selling Billboard to our investment firm, because growing up as a reader, I knew that we could take it to bigger and better places.
If you won't trash your predecessors, how about your competitors? Are there any magazines that you think are doing a really bad job at certain things? And conversely, are there any magazines in music that you think are doing a good job? Because there aren't many print magazines left, with Guitar Player going down last week. There's Downbeat, Rolling Stone, Spin, and for consumer publications, not much. So, how about your overview, good and bad, of the current increasingly shrinking landscape of music magazines?
Yeah, I think in general, I the landscape is, it has been for a long time littered with many publications and creators. Like today, if you're going to launch, like you're a creator, right? On YouTube, Needle Drop, Anthony Fontano. Look what he does, right? That, like, it's funny. He's witty. Like I shout out to Anthony Fontano. Like he's got a unique style. So that's today's, like, Spin, right? Um when Spin launched on March 19th, 1985, it was like the 89th music magazine. And think about that. In 1985, I mean, think how many today there are with bloggers, creators, even now print magazines that have, really come back. There's just too much out there. And so that's the landscape, right? That's the landscape. The idea now that someone like Pitchfork would fold into GQ, doesn't totally make sense to me. I mean, Pitchfork's a big brand. There's a Pitchfork festival. It's owned by Condé Nast. I mean, geez, you're Condé Nast. You can't support Pitchfork. Wow. I think, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but basically every brand has a different thing that they're sort of known for. And in the space that we operate in, which is music and culture, it's Spin and Rolling Stone. That's what it's always been for a long time. And I'm not saying that the other outlets don't have credibility or whatever they do, and they're great. But as far as just, the other day, like you run into just anyone and everyone, and they know Spin and they know Rolling Stone, and these others, they don't. You kind of have to like work in music to know, some of these other titles. But yeah, like someone was commenting on the thread there about, oh, once you've been in South Park, you've made it. Like you don't see these other publications in South Park. The other day someone was moving furniture and into my office, and they're like, "What do you do?" And like, "Oh, Spin, Spin magazine." Oh, like just you bump into people, they know Spin, they know Rolling Stone. So it's not to say that those others aren't important and don't have a role, but there's certain publications that are just blogs basically, and they're good and they're credible. And then there's others, I think, that have tried to compete with what we do. And by the way, some of them were friendly with. Like, we're friends with some of the owners of these other magazines and other titles. There's so much more competition now because of creators, right? And we consider ourselves on TikTok, we're a creator. When we took over Spin in 2020, there was no TikTok for Spin. Now 4.5 years, and we have almost as many followers on TikTok as Rolling Stone, and we get some of the most engaged content on platforms like Instagram Reels. And you go on to Spin's Instagram and you can see all the action that Jack Black from Tenacious D's commenting, and all these, Haley Williams from Paramore, like all these different people, and there's just energy online and on social, and that's what I love. And that's because we've been a tried and trusted brand for a long time, and actually almost 40 years. We'll be 40 in March.
But your social numbers are staggering. 95 million monthly exposures from combined socials and website. I was going to ask you as the next question, and you partially addressed it just now. What have you done to get numbers at large? And I wasn't aware of the community building perhaps that you've been doing on social. I just read them one way and I like them, but I haven't really participated or spent enough time on anything. What else besides potentially building community have you done to be that successful and that huge in social?
Yeah, I think one is to engage with everyone on social that we can with our team. You know, it's a two-way conversation. There's also, outside of social, it's also events, it's the parties, it's the different places that we show up. And, we want to put our best foot forward, whether it's on social media or at events. But it's simply, engaging with people on DMs, on comments. It's also just celebrating other artists as well. Sometimes there'll be artists that will champion that don't have that many followers on social media. And I think it was Young Summer that we have in the new print issue. If you pick up a copy of Spin, Young Summer's, mentioned, and Young Summer didn't have a big social following. So it's not about just how many followers they have. I think it's the engagement, like you're saying, David. Like, that's how you build community, by engaging with your audience. And that's what I love about this platform Tom's built, is it's about the commenting and the interaction, which I know we're going to get to later because I see lots of great comments there. But yeah, I'm really, optimistic about how you can leverage social to build your brand, right? It is about how you build your brand. That's where people are hanging out on TikTok. If it doesn't get banned, by the way, at the end of the year or whatever is about to happen, on Instagram, on X, it's where people are hanging out. That's where people are talking about music, Discord servers, like that's people are hanging out. Reddit.
You mentioned events a minute ago, and anyone that's been to South by Southwest in recent years knows that when Spin arrives at an event, it arrives pretty large. What's your approach to events at this time, and what determines what events and festivals you decide to partner with?
Yeah, I think what we're always looking for is just a good why for Spin. So South by, the why for us has always been Bob, the founder of Spin, gave the first keynote, or maybe the second keynote ever at South by in like 1987 or 1986, like the first or second South by was Bob. And a lot of you in the chat are talking about the South by Southwest day parties at Stubbs Barbecue. Like, those are so fun. Like, there weren't really day party music showcases at South by. Spin was the first to do that. So we've been at the forefront of some of the first at big conferences like South by Southwest. And so we chose to really start to reactivate at South by 3 years ago. During the pandemic, there were several South by cancellations. And there was a period of time where Spin just wasn't at South by. But when we came back, we knew we needed to stick to our roots, which was to do the day parties. So the last few years, we did the day, we did an evening. We did an evening party with Killer Mike from Run the Jewels to help launch his new album, Michael, which went on to win multiple Grammys. And he also got arrested at the Grammys when he received the Grammy, which was sad. But yeah, massive storms. I see Fiona talking about, yeah, it ended up moving inside at Stubbs because of the storms and the rain. But yeah, generally speaking, like we've tried to do some anniversary shows. We did the day party last year again with Sunny Day Real Estate celebrating the 30th anniversary of their album. We did an evening party at Emo's with Gary Clark Jr. For his new album JPEG Raw, and then we brought out a surprise guest, Marcus King. So I think we want to be at places like South by where we can add a lot of value to the fan experience, because when you're at an event, I think you really have to like pay it forward, because you can't control what these venues do. Like we go in and use Stubbs, like we can't help it if a beer is $15, right? We can't help it if there's all this, $60 t-shirts, like those are set by other people. So we just try to add as much value as we can at those events. And that's why we brought out Marcus King as a surprise at the Gary Clark Jr. show. And, leave it to the concert, the mega concert promoters to do their business model. But ours is really about how do we put the fans first, and then they walk away and go, oh man, I'm going to go back to another spin event. So that's, we show up at Coachella, we do a private Coachella party. And then, yeah, there's more public events on the horizon, definitely. Especially now that the magazine's back, we're seeing people really wanting, I think, to engage with our staff, with Bob Guccione Jr., with me, with like people are kind of coming to us like, hey, can you be here? Can you be there? And yeah, we're trying to be really smart about which events we do. And right now, I think we're targeting about one event per month. That we're trying to produce along, and usually it's alongside of another event like South by.
And is that going to be in addition to the festival type of activations that you've done in the past, or is it going to be replacing those and doing more of your own events instead of having a table or booth at a huge event?
A little bit of both. I think something like South by will be there alongside of it, but we're looking at some independently produced events that aren't alongside of anything. They'll basically be like cover launch parties. So the idea is when we're about to announce, say like Lainey Wilson, the country star, was just on this cover. There'll be an event to celebrate the cover launch like you used to see. Those used to be big. You would have a cover launch party. And yeah.
How did you end up with Lainey Wilson on the first print issue from Spin in 12 years? Probably not what most people were expecting.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we just noticed, as everyone did, how country was becoming such a large part of pop culture. The series Yellowstone, which obviously Lainey was on, it's a huge part of pop culture. I think it's the number one show on Paramount Plus. And we saw like the Post Malones, the Beyoncés, like, a lot of influence of Nashville and country. And we just felt like it would be bold, right? To have someone that's, I don't mean to sound derogatory, but like someone that like country twangy to be on the cover of Spin. You can see like, oh, a Marcus King or whatever, because he's kind of like got like the country rock, country blues. Like he is country, but the sound is not as, I mean, Lainey's like, she's country. And so I think we wanted to just be bold and come back with someone, a strong female personality. We liked the music. We also just felt like her vibe was good, and we, were thrilled to sort of celebrate her. And there could have been a lot of other people on that cover. And I think all of us, like, you would expect like Pearl Jam or Foo Fighters or like, sure. And there'll be plenty of time for those covers. And also too, like some of we have a funny saying around Spin, we call it Mount Spinmore. And if you're on Mount Spinmore, like Mount Rushmore, you're like kind of, you're at the top of the top and with the spin editors like Soundgarden, these kinds of bands. Like those are like the legacy spin bands. And we knew to also reach this next generation of readers, let's expose the people that like all those bands to someone a little different they didn't expect. And it's been a really good response. I think that because it was kind of unexpected, I mean, we knew what would sell magazines and what would be good for our audience was to just put spin back into print. So pretty much the logo right here above me, that logo is what sells the magazines, not Lainey Wilson. And we're not in the business of, oh, let's sell magazines. It is about like who we want to lift up. And of course, there's the business model, but let's set that aside for a second and go, wait, who do the editors like? Who are we gravitating toward? So yes, there will be plenty of time for the hardcore spin readers to get their fix of the original folks that Spin wrote about. And those, and also spin.com. I mean, we update spin.com and socials 10 to 20 times a day. I mean, there's always something new on spin.com, on our TikTok, on Instagram, and it's often about those legacy bands that we've written about for so long and we still love them.
Okay. Who do you think you might put on your next cover of the November-December issue?
Well, we can't talk about that yet because we're under some confidentiality, and it just wouldn't be fair to all the hardworking editors at Spin to give away everything. But it's going to be a big cover, and I think it's impressive. The next issue comes out in just after Thanksgiving. So keep your eyes peeled for it. And I wish I could announce it, but it's only mid-September, David.
So many issues to sell. You've done a lot more besides events and spin, and my friend Andrea Williams from the Cool Out Conference is asking about the different extensions that you've launched in the tech space, in the label space. Maybe talk about that for a couple of minutes.
Sure. Well, yeah, you were talking about the record label. Yeah.
And
Yeah, the big idea was a brand like Spin, you can do so much with it. It goes very deep. It has a lot of history. Very thoughtful people have worked at Spin. We have an incredible alumni network. I love the alumni at Spin. I love it when people reach out and tell me their stories about when they worked at Spin. And we've actually done some little reunions. We're going to try to do more of them. Yeah, long story short, I felt like the big takeaway was don't pour out the brand. You can do all these things like record labels and events and just try to honor the history of the brand. So we did launch this record label trying to stick to our roots. So it's been about discovering new artists, and we partnered with Virgin Records because we like the team, and also Randy Jackson and Paula Moore, and they've been fantastic. I think the imprint is called Greater Than Distribution, Spin Records, and the name Greater Than Distribution says it all. I mean, we're really about the art and finding these great artists. And we're not the first magazine to start a record label. The artists don't get any special treatment as far as I'm concerned from the editors. They still have to pass the buck, but we also have kind of reached back and seen that there's some artists we can help. For example, All American Rejects came to us and wanted to release a single on the label. So we did that. We released a new single with the All American Rejects last Friday. And yeah, I think it's a natural place to be, in a place like a record label, trying to help honor and champion artists and find undiscovered artists and profile them. And we have a unique way of doing it. I mean, we have unique franchises in our editorial. We have a unique way of telling narratives that aren't just marketing speak. So that's the label. We launched a TV network called Spin TV, and you can find it on Local Now, Plex, I think Amazon Freevee. And it's basically a 24/7 streaming network. It's got behind the scenes of our photo shoots. It's got documentaries such as a doc about the Pixies. It's a very cool channel. So yeah, we're very, very excited about what that channel is going to become, and it's getting more and more distribution every quarter. And yeah, we're working on some really fun things in our partnership with 101 Studios. We have a TV film deal with 101 Studios, which is one of the largest producers of content for Paramount Plus and a bunch of others. And yeah, I don't want to spoil anything with the 101 Studios deal, but it got announced a while ago, and we're working, we have such a big library of content that could be turned into films. And
So
that's
you're
how.
repurposing older content rather than starting new long form productions with 101.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, there'll be long form, short form, really any of the IP that you find in the magazine that we could extend. That's the big idea. A lot of the best content that's out there is usually based on, not usually, but is sometimes based on magazine articles and articles that you find. So yeah, I think it's a good place to inspire new ways of storytelling. And then
Where do
you're
you
asking
see,
about Spin Labs. You were asking about the last extension of the brand. We launched a music tech incubator called Spin Labs, and we're incubating music tech companies. And we're putting engineers into the companies that we know, doing investing. We're really looking for the best and brightest in terms of in terms of music tech. And so there's a whole group leading that called Level Up Ventures. They're our partners on it. And it's a fantastic way to think about the world. Like we're thinking about like what's the next Spotify. We're thinking really big. Tools for artists, tools for the business. I think we're in like a software company that helps power ticketing businesses, and there's all kinds of businesses that we're in that now relate back to what our core is, which is love of music.
cool. Where do you see Spin in like 3 years, 5 years into the future? Same but bigger, or is it impossible to predict?
No, I see it as continuing to go much, much bigger. We've talked about ways to expand into more and more events. So that's becoming like we're talking one event per month, and now we're talking about even more inventive ways to partner with artists on events. Um, I see Spin potentially doing more international reach. We've got readers really all over, and we want to pay attention to what's happening in Canada and the UK and Australia, all the places that you might expect. I saw someone in the chats from the Cayman Islands. I don't think we have a Spin in the Cayman Islands, but hey, if you see it at the airport, pick it up.
I'll
uh,
drop them off when I go.
yeah, but I think generally speaking, um, we're thinking of the brand as becoming even more of a household name than it is. Like I said, you run into people like, oh, Spin, I read Spin. Yeah, I love Spin. Oh, I used to read Spin. And it's continuing to print the magazine, but potentially more special issues, maybe double issues. The 40th anniversary is coming up in March of Spin, so there'll be a big celebration around that. But I think we'll just continue scaling the business, increasing the readership, and then you'll start to see Spin on the big screen at films, more and more of our distribution of our TV network, and then just continuing to deepen our bench of executive talent at the company, and continuing to build more relationships with readers.
Great. So you had said March 19th, 1985 was the release date of the first issue. So next March is going to be 40 years old. What can you say now about what you might be planning for then for the 40th anniversary day?
Well, yeah, we have some surprises coming up, and I just don't want to give away everything. But the general idea is that it's going to be a year-long celebration, so it'll be broader than just March. So there'll be events happening all throughout the year to celebrate 40 years. But yeah, the actual date is March 19th, 1985. That's when Spin came out.
Does
So
March 19th fall in the middle of South by dates for next year?
it comes about the week after.
Week after.
So yeah, we're planning some events around South by. We're planning some events next summer. Um, you know, it's March 7th through the 15th. So yeah, we're really excited, and it's going to be a year-long celebration of Spin, and we'll have more announcements soon. So stay tuned.
All right. So 10 minutes to go. I'm going to start checking the chat for great questions. Glenn Friedman's asking, do you ever honor Black heritage artists?
Yeah, if you look back into the 80s, Spin, we put Tracy Chapman on a cover, a Black female. I mean, I don't know how deep you want to go, but yeah, Run DMC, Public Enemy. There's a funny story that Bob Guccione Jr. often tells. Bob was sitting in his office in the mid 80s when the magazine came out, probably a couple of years after it came out. And he got a call from, I think it was Russell Simmons. Is that?
Could be.
No, maybe it was Quincy Jones. He got a call from a very prolific African American um, entertainer and music executive, several, and they called him up and said said I was trying to get a hold of the white boy who's putting all the brothers on the cover, because that wasn't happening in the 80s. And then, more recently, we're very close with Killer Mike from Run the Jewels. We had Run the Jewels as a cover about no, they were Artists of the Year 3 years ago.
Um, do you buy into the notion of digital fatigue in terms of explaining why some magazines, other magazines like Cream, coming back? There seems to be, a consumer hunger for tangible physical print despite the challenging business conditions attached to that. Do you think that it's in part a response to people being on screens and only screens for those pandemic years?
Oh, definitely. All we're inundated with everything in our phones, right? I mean, you can be on this all day, and I think that people like to have something physical in their hands to get them out of their phone, and that's why magazines still exist. I mean, even that's what we're seeing now. I mean, I had a friend's daughter tell me she was looking for a car to buy that had a cassette player. So one of her qualifications was I want to play cassettes in my car. So everything old is new again. I think there's a book that came out called The Revenge of Analog, something like that. I think that is happening because you're right, David. It's everyone's very consumed by what's in their feed and on their phone, and they want to put their phone down, just like vinyl, I think, right? I mean, why I've got this vinyl player here at my office. Like, why do I need to go over to my shelf and put vinyl on? Because it's cool. You like the sound, you like the feel. There's like an experience. I think it's the same thing with a magazine. You want to flip through the pages, read it on the airplane, read it on vacation, maybe read it while you're at the dentist office, whatever. And then there's collectors as well. I think that's another type of person, as well as people who want to collect an issue and have a different experience than you get on your phone.
For sure. Personally, my friend Jason Pearl gave me the new issue, and I knew on Sunday when I went down to the beach in Asbury Park that I was going to have a 5.5 hour wait in blinding sun, not ideal phone reading conditions. Plus, I needed to save my Wi-Fi juice for the Springsteen performance. And people were just looking around, and I used it as my place marker in the sand when I had to go out and come back 45 minutes later. And it was interesting seeing all the attention that it got. And people seemed to genuinely be a little jealous when I was sitting there reading it all that time. So it definitely gave me the chance to read the issue, and it was a great one. I've got a couple more questions for Jimmy, but I'm going to do one more call out. If there's anything that I missed that someone posted, repost it. And Teddy Swims would make a great cover. Oh, it's Fiona. Okay, well, that's a good thing to take note of. Last call for questions. I'm going to ask Jimmy something I wanted to ask earlier. Who's your favorite music writer of all time?
Music writer.
Journalist.
I would say, man, that's a tough one. I didn't even prepare. Gosh,
Or what was the last music article that you read that changed how you thought about something or just really moved you? Like the role that music journalism can play besides just informing fans.
I think I may, that would take me even longer to think about, because there's so many. I mean, some of my favorite pieces are like spins. Well, some of it's non-music, some of it's music. There's a killer story about the LA rave riots that we did that I just love. Our story about Kate Moss in the mid 90s was fantastic. I mean, you can't stop reading it once you start. Um, Seeing an article about an artist you've never ever that's never been written about is very cool, right? And then they become huge, like we did with Olivia Rodrigo. I'm just throwing some random ones at you. Um, Gosh, I am trying to think. Come back to me on that on my top writer. Gosh, I
Well,
could make some people really jealous. I mean, some of the best writers that we've had at Spin have been guys like Jim Greer. Um,
Alan White.
Alan Light's great, yeah. And Alan's got his Sirius XM show now. I'm just thinking of ones that are even earlier than that, and most of them have gone. Oh, Celia Farber. Uh, there's legends for sure, and it's hard to pick my favorite, but man, there's so many. That's a tough question, David.
Well, for me, like I have a deep history with music journalism, and the way I look at it is that music fans they know when they're moved, they're tapping their heads, nodding their heads, bopping around the backyard, playing air guitar, but they might know that they're moved, but they might not know why they're moved. And the best music writers for me, like David Frick and Greg Mitchell, Bill Flanagan, Anthony DeCurtis, they have at their best the ability to kind of say what it is that makes a song great and helps you connect with why you're moved and energized and motivated. And when you get that, it helps you connect with more of that kind of music. You engage more deeply with music, and it makes it a little easier to find more of that kind of music so you can get more rushes. And there's so much, of course, out there. That's kind of why I continue to read music journalism and what it's meant to me over the years.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, I even though he worked for a competitor, Hunter S. Thompson, legend, the Gonzo style of journalism, where the journalist is the central figure. That's
Charles
all.
M. Young
Yeah,
is
I,
nuts.
I think Elizabeth Gilbert wrote some fantastic pieces for Spin over the years. There's been so many. It's really hard to pick one, but great question.
Hey, Tom.
Hey,
Tom,
Jimmy,
come up.
Jimmy, this has been amazing. I love everything about what you're doing. This is such a cool thing that you've done to bring spin back to the fans of music. So good on you. Um, my dear friend Fiona asked a question in the Q&A. Who designed the iconic logo? Do you know that by chance? That's such a great logo.
Thanks. I don't know, but I will ask Bob, and we'll get back to you, Fiona.
It's a fantastic. It's everything about spin is so cool. And you said it well. What's old is new again.
Yep.
Um, when you brought up a tape deck in a car, sadly I lost a car in a flood about 10 years ago in Nashville, and it had a tape deck in it. I've missed that from that day forward. But
Yeah.
guys, I'm afraid we're out of time. David, thank you very much for bringing Jimmy to the platform. And, Jimmy, again, thank you for bringing spin back. Every music fan in the world benefits from what you're doing there. And so good on you, and keep doing it.
Yeah.
Can't wait to go to the party at South by next March. That's going to be a big one.
Yeah, thanks. I hope you and all of your readers will come and your viewers.
To the audience, you got yourself another treat today, and you're rewarded for coming back again and again and again to this platform. We will be back here next Thursday at the same time with 2 more rock stars. Be nice to everybody, folks.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom. Thanks, David. Nice to
Thank
see you all.
Thanks,
Have a good
Tom.
day,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.